Toward the end of the garden season, we often have little bits of this and that keep coming in. There's not enough to really go through the canning process, but there's too much to use now, and so you want to preserve it in some way. One of the things that happens with is tomatoes. Often you'll have some of them still green that you want to deal with, or you'll have some ripe ones that you want to take care of. One alternative that is not well used with tomatoes is actually freezing. Now, in general, frozen tomatoes don't have the flavor or the texture quality or the keeping quality that canned tomatoes do, but it is an alternative that you can use. Now, one of the things that you may have are a few cherry tomatoes left, and these are really easy to work with. You simply wash them, take off any stems that may be left, get a freezer bag ready, and pop them in. Now, once they're frozen, like these are here, it's a little bit harder to see through the frostiness, but they're frozen hard, and when you serve them, you'll want to serve them in a salad, for instance, still icy. Otherwise, they become very, very mushy, just like one that had been partially cooked would, because the effects on texture of the expanding during the freezing and the ice crystals breaking the texture apart inside the tomato itself. But this is one way to go. You can also use these in cooking. Again, you probably want to skin them before you do, if you do go with cooking. Another alternative would be a fully ripe tomato. Now with them, just like with canning, you want to make sure that as you peel, by blanching them for a minute and then chilling them down real quick, that you peel that off, then you core. Make sure that you get all the hard white parts out of the center, because those are not going to be good later on when you're ready to eat them. Then you have several alternatives as to how to go. You can freeze these whole, but again, they're so large that the freezing process is going to be very slow. You get really low quality by doing that. If you have smaller tomatoes, you might want to try that. You can cut them in any kind of piece that you like, depending on what you're going to do with them later. You can cut them in chunks, you can dice them, or you can actually go ahead and slice them. Now, if you're going to slice them, then all probability you're going to be using them in salads or in sandwiches. But again, you may want to be sure that you serve them icy when you use them later on. Slice them according to how you're going to use them. So if it's for sandwiches, you're going to want to slice them fairly thin, say 1/4 inch thick. Now with these, what you're going to want to do is freeze them as quickly as possible. So spreading them out like this on a tray that can go in the freezer until they're frozen, then putting them into bags would probably be one of the best approaches that you could use. However, don't leave them uncovered in the freezer any longer than it takes to get them frozen solid, because if you do, they'll begin to dry out and lose quality. Another thing you may want to do is to slice them a little bit thicker, say 1/2 inch thick, and this works really well with green tomatoes too, although the green tomatoes don't need to be peeled. Slicing them 1/2 inch thick, then have a rigid-sided freezer container that you can use, and 2 pieces of freezer paper. Now set 1 piece in and then put 2 pieces of freezer paper with the slick side toward the produce, and this will enable you to take out 1 or 2 slices at a time. You may want to cut your pieces a little bit better than I did here, but you get the general idea. With the pieces in between, you then have a chance to get them out later, and it keeps them separate so that you don't all have to remove them all at one time. Now here you would want to have some wax paper that you could crumble in to fill up all the airspace. Otherwise, again, you get that drying out, which is in essence freezer burn. You lose nutritional quality as well as eating quality. Another thing that can be done with tomatoes is to juice them. Now, one of the problems with juicing tomatoes is that the quickest way to do this would simply be to take these tomatoes and chunk them up a little bit and throw them in the blender. Unfortunately, that incorporates a lot of air, and when the tomato is broken up, the air combines with the enzymes around it, activates those enzymes, and causes a deterioration of the pectin. And later on, when it thaws out, you get separation of the solids from the juice. And we see this a lot at fair time, because in canned tomatoes, the same thing happens. So what you do to reduce that separation is to chunk the tomatoes up quickly after you've got them peeled and cored, put them in heat and under a low heat and simmer them for about 20 minutes, cool them down in a pan of cold water or a sink of cold water as quick as you can, then package them. Now with something that's liquid like that, you're going to have to watch for headspace. So depending on the type of container, with a pint glass container, let me check here and make sure I give you the right amount, you'd leave a 1/2 inch of headspace and a quart for, an inch for quarts if you have the wide mouth container. Now if you have a narrow mouth container, because it narrows up here at the headspace area, you'll want to leave 1.5 inches for quarts and pints so that you have more room for expansion of the liquid during freezing in those situations. Remember, They don't always have to be canned. Freezing will extend the life. Now with a canned tomato, shelf life will pretty much be 2 years, and then the safety continues, but nutrition begins to fall. With frozen tomatoes, you're going to want to use them within at least a year's time. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.